Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the transit of Jupiter through the sign of Gemini. And as I record this, it is coming up in just a matter of days. I had been meaning to make this video quite a while ago and just kept putting it off, and now it's really down to the wire, so I'm going to do it. So the official dates that Jupiter is going to be in Gemini is from May 25th, 2024 until June 9th, 2025. So we're talking about over 12 months, which is the typical cycle of Jupiter, 12 or 13 months. And so we wouldn't consider Jupiter to be a generational planet, but it certainly is not an inner planet either. So I'm going to be putting timestamps and doing each sign, but I just want to make you aware that you could very easily have this transit going into more than one house. So, especially since people are usually printing out their natal chart to follow with the transits or, looking it up, you're going to have to do that with this because I'll give you an example. Let's say your rising sign is 20 degrees of Gemini. You're going to have that first 19 degrees will be in your 12th house. So you have to know, you have to see what it's going to be like when it's in your 12th house and then when it goes into your first house. So anyway, before I do each of the signs and have the timestamps, I want to just say a few brief words about what's going to happen in general for Jupiter when it is in Gemini, for all of us, regardless. And this is an example of when I consult websites about information that I'm trying to impart on other people, and I feel like I want to make sure that everything I say is accurate, that sometimes they don't mention things that I would mention. So if we understand what Jupiter represents in astrology, first of all, Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, and it rules the 9th house, which it deals with the higher mind, or you could just say it's the higher mind. So it is associated with universities and academia, but it's also philosophical ideas. So the person who is a deep thinker, who ponders the meaning of life, that would be Jupiterian, if that's a word. What else? Anything to do with expansion. So Jupiter is about growth. It's about expanding what is. So whatever house it goes into, Jupiter can make it bigger. And this is why they always say, like, when Jupiter goes into your first house, watch out, because that's the house of the body. And if you don't need to gain weight, just keep that in mind, because it could be growth oriented. But, Jupiter goes into your second house, it could be increase in your money, your possessions. In the 10th house, some lucky breaks for career. So it has the high-mindedness to be about the higher things in life, but it's also about, expanding geographical boundaries. So this could be long distance travel for some people. And then by extension, this talks about different cultures. So it's kind of like broadening your mind to, accept people from different races and ethnicities, nationalities, that sort of thing. It's about being generous. So Jupiter, if somebody has a prominent Jupiter, they may be the kind of person who is very generous with others. Now, of course, you can say financially, but it can also be just with their spirit, where they think the best of others. When we think of people who are petty or stingy, it kind of like transcends the money that they are kind of clinging to and don't give to others. It can be with being stingy with compliments, that the person doesn't really have a good word to say to others. All of these things are kind of holistic. I don't just look at generosity as being connected to money. Another thing that Jupiter represents is freedom. Okay, so that's something that we've been hearing about a lot today. So in terms of what, and of course, blessings, I think I said the word luck. I like the word alignment these days because I think it speaks to, kind of syncing up with what it is that we want, which is more of a conscious kind of a thing. The word luck sounds pretty random, and I prefer to emphasize things that are, of our own doing, that we are directing in our life. So Gemini rules the third house in astrology. It's the opposite sign of Sagittarius, and which, is ruled by Jupiter. So it does have a connection to Sagittarius being a complementary sign. And when you look at those the polarity between the third and the ninth houses that represent Gemini and Sagittarius, I think of the third house as mundane knowledge, and also apparently the third house is social media, and that would extend to the internet as a whole. And as we know, the internet is the center of the universe in a lot of ways. So Jupiter in the third house, in Gemini, suggests to me an expansion of what the internet represents. So you could say information. Now, some people might say disinformation is possible too, which of course is always, there's always both things at the same time that are a possibility. You have to take the good with the bad. But the point is that this suggests more options. Now, we already know that there are more options, for instance, than YouTube. As soon as YouTube became heavily censored, other avenues started opening up. And they were in existence probably before the big heavy crackdown, but this is going to make it even more, maybe it'll be just explosive growth. And because we do rely on the internet so much these days for so many things, it is definitely something that we will welcome, because we will have more options. The more options, the better. And that's really what Jupiter represents, is more options. And that gives us more freedom. Freedom of choice is a big thing. One of the reasons why it was so oppressive under the communist, during the Soviet Union, during their communism, was that they didn't have very many choices. And, you can argue that in the United States, we almost have too many choices, because it's like, oh my gosh, do we really need these many brands for one thing? But anyway, the point is that I feel that the reason that this is significant about communication is that we're going to need communication. Because in the next 12 months, things may be happening at a rapid clip. And that could include changes taking place in our general society that have constant updates, where it's like breaking news all the time. And we need to have news outlets rather than suppressed information. So you can just imagine how it must have been when there was no internet and when there was heavy censorship in certain countries that were oppressed. Cafe astrology mentions too much information when Jupiter is in Gemini, and even, we could have internet gossip or something like that, or gossip in general. But I think that ultimately this is going to be valuable more times than not. I think it's better to have too much than too little, because again, we might be dealing with a lot of change in a very short time. And so I'm going to go sign by sign. I'm going to start with Gemini, because then we're going to be talking about the 12th house. Again, keep in mind that you may have to listen for the 12th house if you're listening for your rising sign, and it's you have some of it there. And this is for anyone who has their sun or rising sign in Gemini, or they have some Gemini in their first house. Maybe that's not their rising sign, but they have something, like in my chart, I have a late degree of Taurus rising, so I have a little bit of Gemini in the first house. So for those of you who do have some Gemini, it will first appear in your first house, and it's going to already be there because of the Taurus transits, and then it will go into that second house at some point. If you have it, if you're like me, I should say. Okay, so I consider the first house kind of the, is symbolic for your life as a whole. So anything that it's described on this website as your immediate environment, I would just say it's your life as a whole. So in any area of life, you might see some kind of growth. There could be some luck that is connected to your life as a whole. You may feel more lucky, more fortunate, and it actually affects your demeanor, because you'll probably be more feel more positive, feel like you have more of that can-do spirit that's associated with Jupiter. And also be more growth-oriented. Because sometimes people, and I'm thinking, like, for instance, for people who have sun signs in Taurus, in Capricorn, although Capricorn is a cardinal sign and it tends to be very ambitious, but I'm saying that for different reasons. For a sign like Taurus, I think Taurus tends to be very much in a comfort zone, and Taurus is a fixed sign, not necessarily wanting to change. And so a person who has, a sun sign like Taurus, for instance, but you have Jupiter, like, for instance, if your sun is in Taurus and you have Gemini rising, you can be somebody who welcomes growth much more readily than you normally would. And speaking specifically of Taurus, in 2024, you do have Uranus going through your sign, so that makes it much more likely for you to do things differently than you normally would. But having Taurus rising, when I always hear that stuff about the comfort zone, I say, what's wrong with the comfort zone? It's comfortable. What's wrong with being comfortable? But the thing is, it's because of the meaning of life. What is the ultimate meaning of life? Well, you could argue, and it has been said, that it is for the purpose of expansion, and Jupiter is the expert in that. So for anybody who has Jupiter in the first house, you may seek out growth opportunities, or they may present themselves to you, I suppose. You also may you may not be so petty now, because there's a magnanimous quality about Jupiter that is like too big to be petty about things in life. So the things that would normally irritate you, you'll probably let them just kind of fall off of your back or whatever, roll off your back. And because you feel more optimistic, that can actually manifest as opportunities presenting themselves to you. Because if you know anything about the law of attraction, they always talk about getting into a feeling state. Well, it's easy to get into that optimistic feeling state because you have this very magnanimous, benefic influence that is affecting you for the next year plus. Even for those people that that don't tend to be ambitious in life, you may go for it. And the amazing thing about it is that just because a person, isn't always a certain way, doesn't mean that they can't change at any point in their life. I mean, you could be someone who has been totally unambitious for 30 years, 40 years, and all of a sudden you just feel like you really know what you want to do and you just go for it. Now, one of the interesting thing about Jupiter is that even when it is experiencing like a retrograde or anything like a hard angle to it, like in your natal chart, for instance, or even a transit where Jupiter is, forming a square or opposition to another planet and is, aspecting it adversely, it doesn't mean that it's just terrible, because Jupiter is such a positive influence that it can just mean more overindulgence. So that's the one thing to be careful of, is that you're not so optimistic that you're miscalculating things. And this is certainly something that people can do, where they like, for instance, let's say they want to start a business and they just like planned for everything to take off right away, and they have like this business plan that is just based on the perfect circumstances, and they're not being conservative about it, which would be being cautiously optimistic. They're just wildly optimistic. It's a difficult thing to talk about, because you want to encourage optimism, but sometimes it can lead to excess. And also anything to do with having fun or just treating yourself, these kinds of things, there's nothing wrong with those things. But what happens? People do it too much and it becomes excessive, and it can actually affect somebody negatively. It could impact you negatively if you are self-indulgent. So, an example for the, with the first house is it can be that if a person is being too self-indulgent with eating and they gain weight because the first house can be the body. Now, this is not, I don't want anybody to think that this is a done deal, because actually there's something very good that can happen when Jupiter's in your first house. And that can be that you are really positive about your body. Maybe you're somebody who's always had a negative self-concept about your body, and now you're more positive. And it doesn't, I'm not talking about, oh, your body, you've worked out and it's just perfect now so you can accept it. I'm saying no matter where you are, because you know what? If you do have to get in shape, and maybe this is something that has, been the case for years, it's helpful to be coming at it with a sense of positivity. When somebody is like, oh, I hate my body, and they're trying to motivate themselves, that type of negative motivation is not like a good vibe. So this can actually help you with that. What I was talking about, when I was giving the example of Taurus, I was going to say for a sun sign like Capricorn. The reason I was bringing up a sign like that is because Capricorn people can be rather serious. Now, your rising sign, if your rising sign is Gemini, and your sun is in Capricorn, you may already have a bit of like a more lighthearted facade or demeanor, but I would definitely say it's probably more like a facade, because the sun sign is ultimately the most influential over your personality, and Capricorns can be very Saturnian, very somber, because you're very serious and ambitious. However, and some of you may actually have Taurus rising, not Gemini, but Jupiter would have already been in here anyhow, so it's still affecting you. So the bottom line is that this can make you more enthusiastic in general. And because of that, like I said, I do believe that you will attract more of the same. So, and this is a whole new cycle for you as well, being in the first house. Okay, for Taurus, Sun and Rising, or if you have this Jupiter transit in the second house, this is the house that you rule in astrology, the second house. So, suffice it to say, this is your cup of tea to have this transit at this time. And for anybody who happens to have it in the second house, this transit, this is something that you can be happy about, because Jupiter can expand your finances. If you have been wanting some luxury item, because Venus rules the second house, and it can be about your money or possessions, but it can be luxury items. And luxury items can be anything that you don't absolutely need, but you want. The abundance of material resources can make it more likely that you are able to bring that into your everyday reality. Also, it's not only your net worth, but your self-worth. So Jupiter here can boost your self-esteem, which, by the way, like I was talking about with the first house, the second house, the way that you approach life, if it's positive, talking about the first house, and the second house, the way you regard yourself. If you start to feel better about yourself, then your outer circumstances can improve, including your money situation. Your earning potential may increase, but even gifts can come to you in the form of something financial, something related to some kind of possession. And chances are this is going to be not just like some piddling little amount of money. This could be big money. And that also includes if you're working for somebody else and you ask for a raise, right? Or if you are looking to attract money for some kind of studies, that could be a possibility. Now, in that regard, I also think, in addition to just the typical like higher education, that this might even be something that is connected to spiritual training. Now, because you have Gemini ruling your second house, that means that the opposite house, or the 8th house, which is other people's resources, that is ruled by Sagittarius, and its ruler is Gemini. Gemini, Jupiter. So what that can mean in terms of this particular situation is that this what do they call it? Like a windfall might be because of your partner. You might be actually gaining money through the way that you are dealing with other people's finances. You could have more luck if you need to seek out a loan, if you are, like I said, trying to get a raise at work, or even like anything to do with a bank. Of course, loans do come from banks, but other financial issues that you might be dealing with connected to that kind of thing has the opportunity to go better at this time. If you have been plagued by money challenges before this transit, that may be resolved, which would be wonderful. And the other thing is that this can be a great time to really look at how you deal with your money, because you may find better ways to do so. Of course, as I have been saying, Jupiter also has the possibility of creating indulgence or overindulgence. In the second house, you have to be careful about overspending because Jupiter tends to exaggerate things. And also, Jupiter can make people overly optimistic. So you may be like, there's more where that came from when you get some money. And of course, that is something that's like an affirmation that people often say as it pertains to money, because they want to have this kind of abundant mindset. But the thing is that Jupiter in the second house can make you overly optimistic about the money you possess, to the point where maybe you assume money is just going to keep flowing. And if it doesn't, then what's going to happen? You're going to feel this sense of being invincible as it pertains to finances. But what would happen if you spent everything that you attracted to you? You would have nothing to show for it. So yeah, of course, treat yourself to something, but be mindful of the fact that this transit comes and goes. It's not like Pluto staying there for, 15 or 20 years. And also, just on a higher level, this is true for anybody who is trying to improve their relationship with money. If you have a tendency to see money, like if it burns a hole in your pocket, then it's possible that you don't feel deserving of money. And so you have to spend it as soon as you get it. So if you're one of those people where this transit really elevates you to a new financial situation, you may feel uncomfortable because it's almost like the vibration is rising. You're raising your vibration, but you're no, I would say it. You're raising your your standard of living is being raised, but your vibration isn't joining it. And this is what happens when people gain large sums of money all at once, is that if they're not growing personally, it can just feel too freaky to have that happen, and they may not feel deserving, and they may just kind of blow it because they just don't feel like they deserve it. So that ties into your self-esteem, which hopefully Jupiter can also help, but you can always do this for yourself. You don't, if in the next 12 months, if you are fortunate enough to have this transit work out in that way where it really expands your finances, see what you feel. Like if you feel like you need to just kind of like get rid of it, and you may not have that conscious thought, but it might just still be there. So keep that in mind. All right. I hope you have a great Jupiter transit. So now let's talk about Aries Sun or rising sign. So for you guys, this is going to, and this is, by the way, this is for anybody who has Jupiter going through their third house as well. To use myself as an example, not that I'm just, no, actually, I already used myself as an example. My Jupiter is going through the first and second houses. For some of you, this is going to be, maybe you have it in the second and the third houses. So anyway, this is the house that Jupiter rules in astrology, the third house. So it is connected to the mind. It is connected to teaching and learning. And this is also for anybody who is a writer. This is like a great transit because you may be very prolific. Jupiter can expand your, writing. Maybe you become somebody who writes so much it's just like pouring out of you or something along those lines. But it can be other forms of communication too, because the third house can be social media. And by the way, this does not mean that you already had any kind of presence in that field. It might be something that you decide to launch in the next 12 months, and it could be very fortunate for you. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, anything to do with communication, I think that it's going to help with positive thinking, although Aries people tend to be already like that. You tend to be very positive and have a can-do spirit. So I don't think you really need any improvement in that area, but it doesn't hurt to have that, right? Jupiter can increase enthusiasm. So if you are learning something, it's not just that it can benefit you, you can also find enjoyment in doing so. And also you can find enjoyment in teaching others. Jupiter is a planet like Venus, which can be connected to abundance. So these kinds of activities can be financially lucrative for you during this time. The third house is your local environment. So Jupiter here can expand your opportunities locally. And this also extends to neighbors. The third house can be your neighbors. They can be very helpful in some way to you, lucky for you. They can benefit you. Also, the third house in terms of family members are your siblings. So you may have some kind of luck through your brothers and or sisters. I've heard that the third house is also aunts, uncles, cousins, so extended family members. That can be helpful as well. The third house is news in the form of, what is happening, communication. So I think of like the Page of Wands in the Tarot, good news. Start spreading the news. Maybe there's some kind of message that you receive that is wonderful news that comes your way, and maybe it's more than one thing. The third house can be business in the form of sales, or, I think marketing is connected to this sector. So this could be very beneficial for that. And anything that you're trying to get across to others, any kind of message can, gain more traction. But because this is the house of social media, you can really gain through that. And of course, that might even be where you get your sales and where you can market. Unlike the ninth house, which is Sagittarius's domain and the house that Jupiter rules in astrology, the third house is local, like short trips. I think it might, like for instance, in the United States, we have states, so it's not really considered long distance. If you're somebody like me in Illinois and you take a trip to Wisconsin, that's pretty close by. And even like if you live in Europe, you have like different countries, or, obviously this can apply to any, continent in the world. But I think of Europe, I think of all those countries, they can be like states, and people can go from country to country. And even though it might be a totally different language and culture, it still is in close proximity. So, but really your local area is the most favored, and that, that doesn't have to be exactly in your town, but just nearby. You might be more active in that area. Now, of course, there could be other factors that are causing this, like for instance, if you get involved in local government or something that connects you to the community, to the local community. But also, if you are, trying to study something, maybe in the university, because of Jupiter's presence in this house of the mind and the house of learning, this will apply to that. And you might be able to do this more readily than you have in the past. And like I said, it also applies for somebody who's a writer. And I would say too, and even if you were making YouTube videos, anything to disseminate information, writing a blog. The third house can deal with transportation, by extension vehicles. So maybe you get a new car, and maybe it's a bigger car, or if you're like me, a nice bike. But a nice one, not just a beater or a beater car. Or if you're somebody who takes public transportation, and maybe you've had some difficulties, things can be beneficial at this time with transportation issues, like public transportation issues. Or who knows, maybe you can carpool and somebody offers to give you some kind of assistance in that area. Okay, so now we're going to look at the one thing when we talk about excess as Jupiter, that can be the flip side of Jupiter. It's not really as bad as some challenges from other planetary transits where, like the downside of Saturn or the downside of Pluto or something like that. The downside with Jupiter, you'll often find, are based in overindulgence or being overly optimistic. And in terms of being overly optimistic, this can be in terms of the way that you're thinking about anything, because this is the house of the mind. But it's really like Gemini is a sign, and since you're experiencing this in Gemini's domain of the third house, this is kind of heightened, or you could even say exacerbated, if you're looking at it in a more challenging way, because Gemini loves, Gemini is very curious. So your curiosity can, be just like ramped up. Maybe you develop new interests, and that leads you down rabbit holes, and it could be like you just develop a massive case of, what do they call it? ADD. And I often think of Aries people as ADHD, and I don't mean that, it's terrible in a sense that we have these, if you'd call them medical terms or whatever, to describe energy levels and concentration levels, because there's always like wonderful aspects to both of those conditions. People who, have ADHD, they may have incredible energy, physical energy to do things. And it's just that they're trying to fit into this society that makes them sit in desks, makes them, have to just stand in enclosed places when they really have so much energy to spare. So I would say that in this particular transit, if there is something that you want to study, understand that you may get opportunities to study multiple things, and you have to be able to pick and choose. And that's kind of the problem. It's like, what do I pick? Like being a kid in a candy store. I really feel that with Jupiter in the third for you, you could be studying something of a spiritual nature, because you also have Chiron in your sign, which can be about healing the wounds that we carry with us, and also maybe healing other people's wounds. So, being a meditation teacher, especially with the third house in the mind, I could definitely see that. But who knows? Maybe it's a life coach, somebody who really pumps up other people with hope, enthusiasm. And I believe that Aries people can make the best coaches in general when they are patient, when they are getting their own ego in check, when it's not about them, but the other person, and, truly meeting the person where they are. Because your sign, Aries, is very dynamic, and it has the ability to, teach people that they can move mountains with their thoughts. But the key is to be able to focus. And with Jupiter in Gemini, you may find that you have a lot on your plate mentally and you want to just add more and more instead of becoming very selective and then really diving deep with whatever it is that you're studying, instead of skimming the surface and trying a little here and a little there. So, yeah. Anyway, now I'm going to move on to Cancer. I mean, Pisces. Oh my gosh, doing these types of multiple readings, it's a little bit confusing. So please bear with me. And this also applies for people who have this transit in the 4th house. So this is the house of home and family. And so this period of time from late May until the second week in June, you may see that your home life improves in some way. And one of the things that I've always heard is a bigger place, or maybe it's an addition to your household. So that could certainly be the case, but the 4th house is about much more than that. It is a water house, so it does deal with our feelings, and you're a water sign, speaking, specifically about Pisces people, at least. And so you have an affinity with this area of life, based on that, but it's also about your maybe it's your current family or your family of origin. These things can get a boost from this transit. And like where you live and how you live, the conditions of your life can improve. And there's an opportunity for growth, which is very important because we talk about improvements, but it's not always going to be synonymous with growth. For instance, if somebody has a small little cottage and they decide to move into a mansion, and that's like a really big house, does that mean that their life is going to improve? And not necessarily. Maybe at first it seems that way, but then it's just like this burden or whatever. What I'm talking about is more about maybe it's the way you live. That is more positive. So that can, as far as I'm concerned, that can run the gamut of whatever it is that is, going on with your relationships. Because, for instance, this is what I always refer to as the nest. Even like birds, if you think about it, they, like a mama bird goes out, her babies might be in the nest, and she goes out it's almost like going, grocery shopping when she gets her worms or whatever, grub, and brings it back to the nest for the birds to eat it, for the babies to eat it. But it's like the outer and inner worlds are really emphasized when you think about it that way. Well, the same thing applies to all of us. We have our inner life and our outer life, and where we lay down our head is our inner life. Now, it's not the ultimate inner life, but it is in a mundane sense, because it's where we reside when we're not out in public. And this could improve for you. Now, for Pisces people, you have had some great transits in your 10th house, with the sign of Sagittarius, for instance. And there were various reasons for this. Some of the most recent examples were when Saturn went through that sector. Even Jupiter did. a few years ago. I can't remember what year it was, but the most recent one was when you had eclipses in this 10th house of career, which may have triggered some change. And this happened several years ago. I'm not saying this just happened. The point is that the career may have been front and center for years. I would say probably around 2015 to the end of 2017, and then with eclipses, I don't remember exactly when that occurred, but several years ago, let's put it that way. Maybe about 4 years ago, or what have you, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And now, and this is the interesting thing about it, because with Jupiter here, remember that Mars was in your 4th house. So Pisces, the 4th house has been triggered already in a significant way in recent years. In 2022, Mars went into Gemini in August and remained there until March of 2023. So it was like a 7-month run. And that may have set off some disharmony in your home sector for whatever reason. Some astrologers consider the 4th house the influence of the mother, and some consider it the father. But I just say family of origin to indicate either parent. Also for the house itself. So if you were getting renovations done, for instance, with Mars there, but just other things that could have been you've been dealing with, and now with Jupiter in the picture, it can have a very fortunate, positive transit through this area for the next year plus. So family can improve if you had some kind of conflict in the past, it should be a lot better right now. You may receive support. You may just enjoy their company. For some of you, you may take in a family member and expand your own household, your household. I think that even having children yourself would be part of that as well. And if you're someone maybe who was ambivalent about having kids, let's say you're pregnant right now, you may find that it's actually a really great thing. Maybe you were afraid of how it was going to change your life, but it actually blesses your life. If you have experienced renovations, expansion to your home, or maybe you've moved into a new home, you may be compelled to entertain more. And, that may be something that is very enjoyable for you. Maybe in the past you did not feel comfortable doing so. You didn't think you had enough room, or space. You didn't think that you had a nice enough place to invite people over, and now you do. And this is something that you enjoy. And who knows, maybe you're working from home and your home becomes the center of your universe, whereas before, perhaps you were traveling for your work and you were always gone and you couldn't really enjoy your home, and now you can. I'm always thinking of the tarot now, and I think of the Queen of Pentacles, this person who is like just the queen of her castle. So if you are using your home as your office, that could be something that works out really well for you at this time. But also, you could be studying from home, because remember that Jupiter is about higher education. So maybe rather than going to university, you're doing it from home. And I'm not talking about just 19 or 20-year-olds. This could be somebody who's 40 and is going back to college, but is doing so remotely. Now let's talk about the possible pitfalls that could occur. Again, thinking about the terms of like being overly optimistic or exaggerating something, doing these home projects that kind of, just take a life of their own, are too ambitious or expansive, or it seems like what you do one thing and then you're like, okay, now I have to do this. And it just goes on and on and on, There may be the tendency to just focus on the things that are fun domestically instead of, I immediately thought of Saturn transiting the fourth house and what that represents. But yeah, sometimes you have to actually do things that are a little bit more on the serious side, and you may be more inclined to just want to do the stuff that is fun around the house. One more thing that I wanted to mention that is associated with the fourth house is the past. And especially for the sign of Pisces, I think that the past for some of you may be something that you struggle with if you have trauma from your childhood. And this can be a time, this is one of the houses that is connected to going into therapy, psychotherapy, like the eighth house, and even your house, I would say, too, all of the water houses, because the emotions are connected to psychology. So this is actually favorable for psychology or other healing from childhood wounds, because one reason why I think it is because you may be in alignment with feeling like, okay, now it's time. Maybe you feel more positive about the potential of kind of like healing from that, and you're not as afraid of what you're going to find there, because your emotional sense of things is already more optimistic. So that's just one more thing I wanted to mention. So anyway, yeah, there you go. Okay, now we're going to do Aquarius. If this is your sun or rising sign, or if this transit of Jupiter is going to cross into your fifth house at some point. Wow, this is really great for Gemini people. I mean, Gemini. I've been doing too many of these, I guess. To Aquarius, this is so great for you, Aquarius, because this is your fifth house, and this is a house of fun and, things that are hobbies. And just, this is a house of play. This is a house of the child and the inner child. So I would say front and center, if you have only one creative bone in your body, this can be such a great transit for you, because this is the house of creativity. And, when I think of the inner child, that's the first thing I think about. All the people who kind of, especially those who are very talented, who kind of just put their artistic sensibilities on a shelf and said to themselves, okay, that's not for grown-ups. I'm hoping that some of you will get back into whatever it is that, just makes your heart sing, because this is the time for it. And, because Jupiter is associated with luck, or as I would say, alignment, you may find that there is some kind of wonderful happenstance, serendipity that is connected to you and creativity. But I can't deny that this is the house of love and, romance. And so if you're single, this is a great time to be able to date. Aquarius is one of those signs where you guys tend to be more detached to the point where you're not going to just commit to somebody immediately. I wish everyone was like that, because there really is no rush, and getting to know someone can be so, so important, so that you're making a decision based on having all of your information, not just a whirlwind romance, and then all of a sudden you find out that that person was misrepresenting themselves. So how this can play out for you guys is that you may have a lot of opportunities for dating. And this is what I'm talking about, is that there might be a lot to choose from. And the great thing about that is that when you have a lot to choose from, it means that you don't have this sense of like, wow, this is, I haven't had a date in 3 years and there's slim pickings, The more the merrier, because you can see exactly what you're working with. You can see how the different, you have more options. In other words, it's always good to have as many options as possible. Another thing is just fun itself. So because Mars was in this sector starting a couple of years ago, in August of 2022, Mars went into the sign of Gemini and stayed there until March of 2023, which is really, I was going to say, unprecedented. It had to do with a Mars retrograde. So it isn't that it never happens, but just that length of time, it just blows my mind for an inner planet like Mars is. But in any case, it stuck around and made quite an impression on you. But there may have been some aspects to it that weren't necessarily that pleasant, because Mars can bring with it conflict. Or maybe that the person is trying too hard, or that there just are circumstances that don't necessarily favor what could be present now, because the fifth house can be flings. Mars can be lust and the sex drive in general. The fifth house can be recreational sex, because it's recreational everything. And so for some Aquarius people, if you were playing the field a couple of years ago, you may have gotten burned in some way, because you were in a situation either you thought was going to be something more than it turned out to be, or you thought you could kind of just be casual and the other person wasn't having it. So now with Jupiter, there's a much more harmonious vibe that is present, that can really be supportive of fifth house activities. Also, I would say too is that there's a competitive angle with Mars, which means that, let's say you were doing something that's fifth house related. Let's say you were involved in some kind of sport or anything that is possible to have a competition with. Even if it was something you enjoyed and it's your hobby or pastime, it still may have been a little bit uneasy because you were competing for it instead of just doing it for fun. And, sometimes when we compete, the ego can kind of insert itself in there because there are winners and losers. So I see this Jupiter transit as just kind of really enjoyment for enjoyment's sake. Nothing else, no hidden agendas there. So same thing applies for me when it comes to love. You can be enjoying romance for romance's sake without feeling like you have to put a ring on it, like you have to take it to the next level. And it's not to say that you wouldn't do so at some point, but again, this is not the commitment phase, and Jupiter's transit isn't all that long in the grand scheme of things. It will be moving into Cancer on June 9th of 2025. So there you go. Now, it's interesting because as I've been saying with other signs that I've been doing these readings for, Jupiter is such a benefic planet that even its challenges can be more on the mild side. So one of the challenges of this transit for you is that you have to, stay on an even keel. If your quest for pleasure is too great, you may become self-indulgent, and that can create all kinds of problems in general. Since this is the house of pleasure, you may get, ample opportunities to indulge various pleasures, but, how will that affect you, body, mind, and soul? Also, in terms of, whatever, if let's say you are somebody who has been repressing your artistic talent and now you go hog wild and you're just doing it all the time, well, you could neglect another area of life and your life could become imbalanced. And the same applies for somebody who starts just becoming very romantic and involved in these little dalliances, and you forget that you have practical matters to tend to. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, it is challenging, but it's almost like challenging in the sense of too much of a good thing. So it's not that bad, in other words. Okay. So let us talk about Capricorn. For Capricorn, this is going to be in an area of life that is something that you could be very well attuned to, aligned to, and that is the 6th house, which is the house of work, health, and your daily routine, or how you order your time. I have always heard it said that a transit of Jupiter in the 6th house can give you more work than you know what to do with. So in differentiating the 6th from the 10th houses, the 6th house can be seen as work itself, like the workload. Sometimes it can describe the type of work that somebody is doing, but it's almost like a job versus a career, the 10th house, meaning that sometimes there might be drudgery associated with it in the 6th that is more glory, or kind of taking your bow and being seen as, status symbol in the 10th. So, in any case, you could find that if you are in between careers and you want, let's say you have recently departed, or you want to depart from a current career because you just find it very unfulfilling, not aligned with where you're at right now. Maybe you never really liked it, but now you have the courage to leave. you might need some kind of job to pay the bills. And sometimes, people refuse to leave their career because they're afraid that they won't be able to even get some other type of work. At least they're employed. That's how they rationalize it. And this could be a situation where that's never a problem for you. Now, obviously, this is all theoretical until you actually experience it. So don't come at me and say, you promised that I was going to have work every time I needed it. But yeah, that's what has been said. And the type of work that you do, you may find a lot of enjoyment in doing it. And the other area that is really connected to the sixth house is health. And this could be something that gets a boost as well. And even if you have a, health condition, in some cases, it might be a long-standing health condition that you have sought out practitioners to try and heal from, you might finally find the right, the proper regimen. And since this is the area of daily life, it just might be more fortunate for you, or more growth oriented, more expansion is there. Because sometimes I'm sure that most people have found that there are limited opportunities. They may feel like they're kind of being forced to remain somewhere they really don't want to be. The workplace may be not the best environment, and yet they don't seem to have any other prospects, and their life just feels very confined. And I honestly believe that in those circumstances, there could be a good reason for that. Like, for instance, Saturn in the sixth house. When Saturn is moving through the sixth house, a person may feel like they have limited options in terms of the work that they're doing. Maybe they feel like it's very difficult to get a job. This is the opposite of that, where it's like it might be ridiculously easy to do so. Your workplace environment might be a very positive environment, whereas under a planet like Saturn or Pluto, it might feel oppressive. It might feel like people are against you, conspiring against you, that there are power struggles. It's amazing how the same area of life can be different when you're experiencing other planets go through that same area. You may even pursue something with the healing arts, especially if it's more on the natural, holistic side. That's where I think you're really going to be lucky, because I always think of the sixth house in astrology, because it's ruled by Virgo, which is an earth sign, as being like, crunchy granola type of a house. And cafe astrology, mentions alternative health too. So there must be something to that then. That's one of the reasons why I like to consult online sources, just to make sure that I'm not just saying things on my own that cannot be backed up anywhere. But yeah, and you may decide to go into this type. Either you're using these holistic methods for yourself, or I guess you could be both, or that's the type of work that you want to do. I also think anything of a spiritual nature can be something that you provide as a service to others. And that can even include like being a yoga teacher, for instance. As always with Jupiter, the downside or the potential for any kind of adverse effects of this transit, primarily this can be in the form of either self-indulgence that affects you physically, including weight gain or other types of result of maybe eating foods, excess of foods, or just excess of any kind of, um, yeah, the sixth house is diet, so it'd be specifically that, I would say, for people that don't need to gain weight. Obviously, if you need to gain weight, that might be really good. But the other thing too is that you might be inclined to work even more. If you're getting more offers, you might just work really hard. And the problem is Capricorns are already workaholics, so that can be excessive. But in general, this is very good. So I think that, um, especially for your finances, for your ability to really enjoy work for a change, if that's something that you haven't been feeling lately, that could be something that is a welcome change of pace. Yeah, so that's that. And now we're going to look at my sun sign, Sagittarius. And this can be your rising sign as well, as anybody who has Jupiter set to transit their seventh house at some point. And I suppose it's fitting that I'm recording this on the night that Jupiter finally is in Gemini. And I just looked it up on the ephemeris, and I'm in the Central Time Zone, United States, and it happened at 6:14 p.m. So I'm recording this just a few hours later. So it's very exciting. And of course, Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius. So therefore, when Jupiter does something, we sit up and take notice because it's our ruler. Okay, so when I think about the seventh house, which is the opposite house, and this is where we go to for transits with Gemini, this is one of those houses where I'm always at a loss for words because I always say the same old, which is committed partnerships and legal matters. And truth be told, that's more than enough to talk about. But the seventh house isn't just about these areas. And so you can be affected by more than that. But let's talk about these two areas before we continue. Obviously, every Sagittarian who is going to experience this transit is not coupled as of yet. And those that are, there may be some of you who are incredibly unhappy in your relationship and you want out more than anything in the world, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So hearing about this transit where Jupiter expands things, and in this case, commitment, probably doesn't sit well with you because you're like, I want to get away from this person. Now, actually, there is this aspect of relationship when we don't attach anything else to it that we can look at the seventh house as being about. Because I have done even I think with some of the private readings that I have done for clients where their seventh house coincides with them seeking a divorce or moving out and things like that. And I'm talking about like a new moon in the seventh house. Typically, you would assume that a new moon in the 7th would be getting married or moving in with someone rather than getting a divorce. But actually, I've seen it play out that way. So, first of all, consider that aspect of it. Also, remember that between August of 2022 and March of 2023, Mars was in Gemini. So that was very significant because Mars typically has about a 6-week transit through a sign. And this was 7 months because of it retrograding. So having said that, this can be a time when you were in a court battle or just in a private battle with your significant other. It is very possible that you stayed connected to that person, but maybe there were things that happened that kind of made it so that it's all over but the shouting, and you just said too much. There's too much that was done and said and done that you can't really walk back anymore. So I want to acknowledge that because I don't want to just make people think, oh yeah, Jupiter in the 7th automatically means that you're going to have a great relationship with the person that you're currently with. No, maybe it will give you that out that makes it the smoothest type of exit from a relationship that is not going anywhere. So that's one thing I want to say. Even if you were to get divorced during the next year while Jupiter is in this area, there is a very good possibility that you will at least meet someone who is more appropriate for you as a life mate than the other person. Also, it's possible that you've already met such a person and you're just waiting for all the everything to kind of shake out in a way that you can exit one situation, enter another one, and maybe it's like a timing thing. Jupiter will be in Gemini until June 9th of 2025. So we're talking about a year plus. So the other thing is, if you are completely single as a Sag and you've been kind of like twiddling your thumbs, waiting around for someone that is more suitable than the people that you have come across in your reality, this could be a time where you have multiple opportunities to meet somebody who would qualify as a life partner. What I really mean by this is that sometimes it's very hard, like there are less opportunities altogether. And in this particular case, you may meet multiple people who are what we would call quality choices. It doesn't mean that you are going to get committed to somebody or married, or, you know what I mean, married or move in with somebody in the next 13 months. It simply means that you may meet people who have the potential to be serious partners, rather than 5th house. When Jupiter's in the 5th house, and it is just kind of like, because Jupiter was in the 5th house a couple of years ago, and you may have met like a lot of people, but it might not have been very stable. It might have just been more flings or fun, because the 5th house can be pleasure, just kind of things like that. But the 7th house is much more about that long-term type of thing. So, I think that's wonderful, but it's also about other types of partnerships. It's not just romantic. It can be a business partner if that's something that you have wanted, and who knows, maybe it's not even on your radar and it shows up for you. Um, but I do want to say something positive about current relationships. You could find that even if your relationship is struggling, that this breathes new positive energy into your current relationship. So I know I made it sound like you could be getting divorced, but if you really do want to make it work with that person, it is possible that could happen. If it's, for the highest good of both of you, obviously. And so another thing that can happen, I did mention legal affairs, and so this could work out in your favor, whatever is connected to them. They don't mention it on Cafe Astrology, but I would also suggest that you could win money in a legal matter, because Jupiter is one of those planets like Venus that can be connected to money. The seventh house is house of public relations. So this could increase your favorability in the public. So that could boost your popularity, which, in some cases, if you have some kind of a relationship with the public, that will obviously be important. So if I would say like show business, or even if you're online and you have a following, that I think that is also, that can be very good for that. And I don't know if they mention anything about increasing clients. The seventh house can be clients. So Jupiter can really boost the number that you have, because it's like one-on-one relationships. And you might, in terms of a relationship with someone, the thing that draws you together with that person can be that maybe you share spiritual beliefs, or any kind of philosophical framework that the two of you are. So it could even be like, I believe it could be something political even, or that maybe it's through a university, through some kind of, the ninth house can be publishing. So Jupiter is connected to that by by virtue of its connection to the ninth house. So if you're involved in something like that, and Sagittarians do tend to be writers, then you might meet a fellow writer. I would even say a Sagittarian, since Jupiter is in the seventh house. Now, in terms of what can be the downside to having Jupiter in this sector, the partner may be acting Jupiterian in the what we would call the challenging sense of the word, which is like excessive in some way. So whatever that means, I tend to think of like spending money like water or something like that. But of course, it can be other things too. And another big thing that could be problematic is that you find that the person that is coming into your life, that they might be commitment phobic, because Jupiter connects with freedom. So that can lead to a person who isn't really interested in settling down. Because you're a Sagittarian, I think you're going to be, even if that were to occur, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because you are the same way. So you understand it, even if you're a little bit aggravated by it. So I think you'll be okay. So there you go. Okay, now we're going to do Scorpio. Well, Scorpio, this transit of Jupiter in Gemini is in your 8th house. And guess what? This is the house that you rule in astrology. So you are well acquainted with the themes of the 8th house. And Jupiter enlarges these areas. One of the big things about the 8th house overall is that it's a house of transformation. And the transformation is internal, because you're a water sign, this is a water house. So like the 12th house is Pisces, and that is also a very interior type of an area. And then the 4th house, that's Cancer, that is the home and family sector, but also the person's childhood. The 8th house we can kind of see as the shadow self or the psyche in general. And when Jupiter is here, this kind of gives a positivity to what some people might think of as a rather dark area. And that's not entirely true, although there is some truth to it because it is an area that is focused on what is underneath the surface. And sometimes what's underneath the surface isn't all that appealing, is it? But this is where you shine. You are connected to this area of intimacy. And because this is expanding for you, and I would say brightening for you, it makes it that much better. Because, Scorpio, and I've definitely known Scorpios in my life, and one thing I like about them is that they're not wussies. They're not easily intimidated. And I'm trying to figure out if that's the Mars rulership or the Pluto rulership. I have a feeling that it's both of them put together. So those of you who are Scorpios or even Scorpio rising, you already are a very strong sign. And so it isn't easy to kind of spook you. But you're human too. And, tackling certain issues can be daunting when they are very intense, which is the 8th house, and can deal with the less pleasant sides of life. And death is one of the themes of the 8th house, but not just physical death, but death of the old self. So you are blessed in the next year, Scorpio, when you make a point of engaging in activities that help with transforming your life. The 8th house is other people's money. So this can, and I always say death plus other people's money equals inheritances. But there are other ways that this can play out too, which can be like people who are getting a divorce and they're splitting up the proceeds. Even like investments, but maybe it's even kind of gifts from other people, financial gifts. Since it's other people's money, if you are coupled, that person's raise benefits you, you know, maybe rather indirectly, but still it does benefit you. So that could happen as well. You may somehow be, you know, working with other people's finances, and somehow it helps you. You know, I suppose in some cases it might be that you're getting paid to do so, but maybe it's even like a parent's estate that you are. That's not the right word, estate, but you know, like you're the. I forgot what they call it, the trustee or whatever, but you also gain from that. The eighth house can be, you know, money that you get, like that you get in a loan. So that might be more easier to do right now. You know, whether it could even be, it could be for any type of loan, but mortgage and I do believe that investments are part of the eighth house as well. So dividends, maybe you get even greater dividends. And another area that is eighth house related is sex. I don't know if it was somebody who watches my videos who commented that it's magical sex. The eighth house is magic, okay? So, I mean, just in general, shamanism, any kind of like transformational type of spiritual program or practice is really indicated here. Jupiter can create, like maybe you're studying shamanism or something like that, paganism, shamanism, but also, you know, when we're talking about magical sex, tantric yoga is a path of yoga that is where, and I don't know if it's simply, if it's only sex. It could be a lot of other things that people do in a pleasure-seeking way, that it's part of this spiritual path. So basically what you're doing, I think, I might be wrong about this, is you're transmuting the energy that could be used in a more mundane sense for almost like in an addictive, compulsive way, and you're kind of making it a higher thing. But anyway, that was my guess. But yeah, I mean, specifically about sex too, remember that not all Scorpio people necessarily have a balanced outlook on sex. As a matter of fact, a lot of Scorpios, that might be a theme in your life where sex has been kind of a double-edged sword. And I remember one of the videos I did about Scorpio once, that was kind of like a universal video for Scorpios. And I said that, you know, sex for Scorpio is a very serious thing. This is not like something that you tend to be very frivolous about. And I had mentioned that I had read somewhere that Scorpios can sometimes remain celibate for a long time because they take it so seriously. And I had at least one, probably more than that, affirm that. So in any case, at this time, sex may be something that you view in a more positive sense, because some of you may have had traumatic experiences in this area that have kind of soured you on the topic, even though, and it still is like the elephant in the room. It's still like this big thing to you, but kind of puts you off to it. And maybe there is some healing there for you or some way where well, I would call it like a healing where it becomes something more positive. Jupiter can be such a positive influence, but but more than that, it's about growth. And a lot of times when a person is unhealed, it's like their growth is stymied. It's not able to kind of like progress. So this could be a time where you are progressing. I have made a point of saying that I do believe that Scorpio is one of those. I think Scorpio is possibly, if I had to compare all the signs, the strongest sign overall. However, I also think that Scorpios have oftentimes been through the ringer, and not just Sun in Scorpio, but other placements like Moon. And in this case, we're talking about the Sun and the Ascendant in Scorpio for this transit reading. And I feel that, despite being very strong, you still may have experienced a lot of trauma. And even though you're able to function, things like that, you still may have healing to do. And this can be a great time to be able to do it. But also, I feel that Scorpio people do tend to have trust issues more than the average person. And I do believe it is because of the trauma that I was alluding to. So this could be a time when you're able to really heal from emotional issues because you're more open to it, you're more trusting of others, so that makes you more able to share what you've been going through. But who knows, maybe some of you will go into therapy and you'll find that perfect therapist who can help you, or other, healing modalities. In terms of challenges at this time is basically with money issues that involve other people. So the temptation can be, for whatever reason, that you are excessive in, relying on other people's money for whatever reason, or borrowing money. And so you want to be careful about any debts that you incur, because Jupiter can really expand those. I heard, I don't know, I guess it was another astrologer talking about this influence of Jupiter, and talking about how it can blow things up. And so people just automatically assume that we're talking about Santa Claus vibes here. And while that can be true, it can also be true that sometimes it can play out in a more negative way by expanding the wrong things, the things that you don't want expanded. But anyway, it sounds really good, Scorpio, especially since you rule this area in astrology. So it should feel very like familiar themes to you. So there you go. Now I'm going to talk about Libra. So Libra, the interesting thing about this transit is that it's occurring in your 9th house. And the 9th house is the house that Jupiter rules in astrology under the sign, or in the sign, of Sagittarius. So this is Sagittarius's domain. And, it's interesting because Sagittarius and Libra form a friendly angle called a sextile. And, you rule the 7th house. And it's funny because, that's my sun sign, Sagittarius, and Libra is going to, I'm not Libra, Jupiter is going to be in the 7th house, in the area that you rule in astrology. And here it is for you, Jupiter is going to be in the area that Sagittarius rules. So it's kind of wild. So the first thing I want to say about this 9th house is that it is a house of expansion, being where Jupiter resides. So this really heightens the Jupiter vibe because Jupiter is in its own domain. So I consider Libra to be a very upbeat sign to begin with. This will only increase your positivity. And an interesting thing that both the seventh house that you rule and the ninth house of Sagittarius rules have in common is the law. The seventh house is I would say like the legal system. Well, I don't know. Maybe the ninth house is a legal system, but then the seventh house are legal affairs and the courtroom. The ninth house is the law itself. In the ninth house might be the legal system too. Not quite sure, but they both have the connection to the law. So I think that it is really a safe bet to say that a lot of Libra people are interested in that as a profession in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily a lawyer, but it could be a judge. It could be a paralegal. It might be a legal scholar. Who knows? And speaking of scholars, the ninth house is higher education, academia. Libra is an air sign, so you are well acclimated to higher education as it is, being an air sign, being connected to the intellect, and also connected to communication. So that might be something that you find very fortunate for you in the upcoming year, very expansive. In addition to that, because the ninth house can be foreign travel, it is possible that maybe you combine that. Whether you are a student who decides to study abroad or a professor who decides to travel to another country to be a lecturer abroad, but also maybe somebody who travels to teach English as a second language, or maybe even, I always use the example of a yoga teacher because Jupiter connects, and the ninth house, because it is the ruler of that. It's the God house. So not only is it travel, but it's God. So if you combine the two, maybe it's somebody who is teaching yoga in Bali or someplace, some exotic place, some beautiful place that can really appeal to your aesthetics, Libra. And speaking of spirituality, because Libra is an air sign, it wouldn't surprise me if some of you, even though you might like astrology since you're listening to this, that you believe in astrology or what have you, but the whole spiritual thing you might be a little bit ambivalent about, because there is that I do believe that for air signs in general, there's that feeling of anything like religion is anti-intellectual, because especially organized religion, which the ninth house can be all about, rather than what I mean by that is rather than the eighth house, which is more like the occult or metaphysical, and it's more, to me, open-ended. The ninth house can be the dogmatic organized religions. They have their do and don'ts and all of this stuff. And, they also have their mythologies, or, if you, I mean, I'm not using that word disparagingly, but just saying their belief systems and their stories that they tell about the the origins of that belief. And you might think that that is a myth, and how can people believe that? And so Jupiter here can kind of like open your mind past thinking that it's all about that, because some people who have kind of like transcended a particular religion, they can, even if they consider themselves more spiritual, they can still find the good in these types of, belief systems. So it could benefit you, religion, spirituality can benefit you in some way. Also, just like your demeanor, you're probably going to feel so much more positive that you're not going to be, it's not going to be that, the irritating thing that happens when we get caught up in all of the nonsense in life. Seeing the bigger picture allows you to do that, and that's what the ninth house can be all about. So since this is the house of publishing, if this is an area that you are interested in, if you're a writer, or maybe you're interested in discovering other writers or bringing them out, this is a great time for that. Also, teaching, and the ninth house, because it is the house of foreign travel, it also deals with people from other cultures, ethnicities, nationalities, and because this is the house of the broad-minded individual, and so that can be featured more for you than is typical in some way. Now, I would definitely assume that one of the biggest ways this could happen is by giving you an opportunity to travel yourself. But this would be traveling long distance, so probably, far away, far, far away. Now, what could be a possible challenge to have this transit in this area? Because there's always going to be, the possibility for some kind of I think this is similar to the opposite house, the third house that Gemini rules in astrology, where um, the idea of learning things can be so fascinating for you, but it might be like you want to do so much, and maybe even with travel, you want to go so many places, and so being able to focus and realize that you can't do everything is probably the best way to handle it, because yeah, I mean, Jupiter in its own house, it can be like, whoa, you want to do it all, and you have to be able to accept the fact that there are limitations. Even studying a foreign language can be lucky for you in the next year. So if that was something that you've been wanting to do, this is a perfect time for it. Okay. Now we are going to talk about Virgos. So Virgo, this transit of Jupiter and Gemini is falling in your 10th house of career. This is at the top of the chart. It's one of the angular houses, so it's considered a big deal. And because Jupiter is all about expansion, you can expect your career to take off. Now, I would, obviously advise people to do their own work. Don't expect, it just to happen randomly. But if you put in the effort, you might get way more than you typically would. It's just like if Saturn is transiting through the 10th house, it might be like really hard work, but in the long run, the person is blessed. Here with Jupiter, it could be a lot easier to make great strides. And you're just going to be more ambitious. When I think of Virgo, I think of somebody who's humble and somebody who is very economic, meaning that even with your goals, you probably tend to be very pragmatic with them, and you don't necessarily get very grandiose with any of your dreams. Everything is kind of like brought down to earth based on your element, right? Well, this might be a time when you kind of are much more expansive in terms of your goals. And there's nothing wrong with that because you have the raw material to make things happen, even if you are dreaming big. And one thing, when I was talking about the humility of Virgo, I feel like you don't tend to toot your own horn. And so I see Virgo people as very talented in a productive way, in a substantial way. Some people are very talented, just in whatever it is that they are, but it doesn't have a practical application. You can be a freaking genius, but unless you can take those brilliant ideas and somehow find a way to make them work in the real world, and in a way you could say, what good is that? So I feel like this is going to be the perfect marriage between your hard work, your work ethic, your common sense and practical abilities, and luck and timing, astrological transit. So one thing that the 10th house can be is being on center stage. Cafe astrology describes it as the limelight, but I think sometimes that can be a bit confusing because it almost seems like show business, when in fact you could be an insurance salesman for all I know. But the point is that you could gain recognition from what you're doing. The 10th house can be your reputation, and this could be very well enhanced in the year plus that Jupiter is in this domain. The 10th house are authority figures, and you can really gain through them. They can open doors for you and expand your career possibilities or your status in life. But by the same token, you might become a leader. And some of you sun sign Virgo people are, you're going to have inner planets in Leo, some of you. And so that just enhances those leadership abilities. Another area of the 10th house is status. And sometimes when I talk about these things, it sounds a little bit superficial. I don't like to promote them because, to me, that's not the meaning of life, is to have a certain stature. But it is part of life, whether it's superficial or not. And that could also be connected to career success. Um, but it's true too that sometimes people are laboring in obscurity and they're doing a lot of things, but they're just not getting the kudos for it. So I'm sure that there are a few Virgo people out there who have been successful all along, and now other people are finding out about it. And I also think that sometimes people are misunderstood. And so, if that has been true for you in the past, where people, you feel like you didn't get the credit that you were due, or I don't know, anything that has to do with your reputation, which the 10th house can be about, all of these things can be improved. And that means that, when I was saying about somebody who's toiling in obscurity, sometimes you hear the term overnight success, and this is, of course, usually applying to show business or something like that. But even like a writer, which some Virgos are, being ruled by Mercury. But this idea of the overnight success, the person may have like 5 novels that they never really were able to sell. And then all of a sudden, one takes off, and nobody realizes that the person was working, in complete obscurity for years. And now all of a sudden they're coming into prominence. Another important thing that might be not as valued, but really is important, is to be able to believe in yourself and what your goals are. Since the 10th house is the house of ambition, it's one thing to want to be successful, but when you have actual goals and you believe that they can happen, that to me is what the law of attraction is all about. So because Jupiter is about positivity, this can mean that you are, positive about your goals, and therefore it's more likely that they will manifest. In terms of what can be a challenge during this time, it's really about having too many um, irons in the fire, maybe, as it pertains to career matters or whatnot. So, being able to focus, but not being too, scattering your energies with so many things because you're so ambitious in different directions, can be very important. And when you can really streamline that, I think you can make a lot of progress for sure. Okay, now we're going to talk about Leo. For you, Leo, this transit of Jupiter in Gemini is going to be in your 11th house, which is the house of friendships and groups, as well as your hopes and wishes. And, oh yeah, and the house of gains. You can't forget about that one. I'm going to talk about that one first. So, gains means financial, in particular, increase in what you're bringing in from career or your business. Jupiter is one of those planets, along with Venus, that can be associated with money. So now recently you had Jupiter in Taurus for the past year, where Uranus is also transiting. So you were able to possibly benefit through at least the Jupiter connection as it pertains to career matters. And so when if you have expanded your career in some way, it only would be logical to assume that you have also increased your money-making abilities. So this is what could be connected to those gains. In terms of the social area of life, it's important to note too that networking can be part of this, which can actually benefit you financially through your career. So I don't want to make it just like it's social for the sake of being social. It might be that it's something that you're doing in a very calculated way to gain those connections for your business or for the career that you're a part of. Because Jupiter can expand this area of life, you can expect to gain friendships, but also gain in the, maybe it's even the type of people that are coming into your life, because there's a broad-mindedness with Jupiter. It might even be people from other nationalities sometimes, or cultures, ethnicities. And Jupiter, because Jupiter is the ruler of the ninth house, which can be long distance travel, and the people that are part of cultures other than your own. And part of that also is about expansion. How do other people expand you? And that is one of the ways. When somebody is very different than you, then you get the experience of seeing the world through different eyes. So there might even be expansion with anything that you're doing online in terms of business. So keep that in mind as well. And it's important to also talk about your social life, because that might be something that is heightened. And because, Leo, you are such an extroverted person and you love to be the center of attention and to have fun, this is your cup of tea. So this can be highly enjoyable for you. And because you have leadership abilities, you may head up some type of group yourself. The 11th house is the house of causes. I call it the social justice warrior, house, and or you could say the humanitarian house. So with Jupiter here, there could be maybe even multiple causes that really stir you up. And the fire signs, like Leo, do tend to, have passions when it comes to certain ideas and ideals. And that may lead you to spearhead some sort of group. There are always downsides to a Jupiter transit because of the excessive quality of Jupiter. So in this particular area, the, preoccupation with social things may deter you or distract you from your other obligations. So, but that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Because I certainly don't think it is. So anyway, okay, now we're going to talk about Cancer. So Cancer, the transit of Jupiter in Gemini will be a time when it is in your 12th house, which is the house of Pisces in astrology. Because Pisces is a fellow water sign, there are always things that the three signs of one element have in common. So that's actually a good thing because it means that you're more acclimated to be able to handle the themes of this particular sector. Because this is the 12th house and a water house, it's dealing with emotions. Well, check. You are somebody who deals with emotions. This is a house of solitude. So Jupiter here can expand the desire to be alone, the opportunity to be alone, like in the form of maybe doing spiritual retreats, for instance, which can allow you to spend time alone in contemplation. And that could benefit you in terms of your spiritual path, but also psychologically, because if you have been under a lot of stress and you really feel like you need to be able to kind of unwind more but not necessarily have to answer to anyone, that could be like the perfect combination, because there might be this desire to do things very much behind the scenes. That's one of the things. Like sometimes people do better with, if they have a project, not advertising it to other people and just really just work by themselves and then launch it and make it public. The 12th house is the house of past lives and the unconscious mind. It is the spiritual realms. And you rule the 4th house of home and family and childhood, which is a form of the past too, but a past in this lifetime. You may be lucky when it comes to exploring things that have a karmic theme. So if you have always been kind of like obsessed with this idea of what your other lifetimes were about and things of that nature, you may find a way to explore that. The 12th house can be the Akashic records, which is like the spiritual database of everything that has ever happened in the history of mankind. Some people know how to read the Akashic records. Maybe you might be that type of person. It's possible that you could be in contact. Maybe you benefit from the people that you meet that have a karmic connection with you within the next year. I also think that, this is the house of like hospitals and prisons, places of suffering. But especially for those cancers who are in the healthcare field, you may find that your attitudes about healing really start to change and you focus on the spiritual. You might be going through your own spiritual evolution or awakening yourself, to be honest with you. This might be heightened. Maybe in the past you were kind of getting into it and now it's full speed ahead. Another thing that the 12th house can represent is self-sacrifice. So it can be altruistic activities, things you do for others that are selfless. And actually, I can totally see Cancers vibing with that, because you tend to be very caring people. And you probably do this already, where you're doing selfless things. However, please keep in mind that because Jupiter has that exaggerated influence, that could be one of the possible downsides of this transit, is that you feel compelled to sacrifice, to give of yourself so much that you might be overgiving. Another theme of the 12th house is self-undoing and addiction, escapism. So because the 12th house can be like stored memories, especially if they're from past lives and you do not have conscious awareness of them and the ability to just automatically access them, there can be a lot of discomfort. Just as there are with the other water houses as it pertains to our psychological side. And the temptation with the 12th house can be to run away from things that are uncomfortable. And like I said, this can be the house of addiction. So watch for any tendency. It doesn't always have to be substance abuse, it can be, excessively watching videos, or even like clinging too much to relationships instead of that, 12th house solitude that I was talking about earlier. Some people try to always look for somebody else to be their cheerleader and to, in other words, that codependency. So learning how to face difficult things without needing to run away will get you everywhere now, and you'll have the support with Jupiter, by the way. It's just that Jupiter can also indicate excess in whatever house it's in. The spiritual path is emphasized for you now and can be lucky for you. The 12th house is also the house of hidden enemies. And I really, whenever I do transit reports, my monthly transit reports, I sometimes will mention that for whoever is having a transit in the 12th house, but I'm really conscious of how that can create, it can stir up negative emotions in people, because nobody wants to think that they have hidden enemies. It sounds very dramatic, but I would just say anyone who is, acting against you in private, maybe they're gossiping, kind of like tearing down your reputation in some way, but maybe it's also, trying to make you look bad in a professional setting. Who knows? It might, I'm sure everybody has experienced this in one way, shape, or form. So it's not, only some people that have to do that. But the bottom line is that Jupiter here can be like a guardian angel and can protect you no matter what somebody tries to do. You've probably, I'm sure this is in the Bible, but it says, "No weapons formed against me shall prosper." So that's kind of what this Jupiter transit is like. Maybe you even get some kind of financial blessing or other type of, when I think of Jupiter, sometimes I do think of even money or gift of some sort because of your karmic, good fortune. Maybe your good karma from other lifetimes somehow manifests in this lifetime as some, material gain. What can I say? But anyway, I hope that everybody is going to have an amazing Jupiter transit in Gemini. So good luck to you. Take care. Bye.